have to act very strongly if we are to reduce the immense risks to the future of our human beings and societies on the planet from climate change. In order to do that, we need an energy industrial revolution. We have to cut emissions per unit of output by a factor perhaps of 8. Divide by 8 emissions per unit of output. That means radical change in how we produce and consume. But I went on from there, and this was in many ways the crucial point, that this process looks rather attractive. It's a process of discovery, innovation, investment, growth, and it's a process which is cleaner, quieter, safer, more energy secure and more biodiverse. So that if we set off down this route, we will find that it's a very attractive route to go and that it's the only growth story on offer. Let's look at wind and solar and tidal and carbon capture and storage for gas and for coal. Let's look at nuclear. We're going to examine them all. We're going to need them all probably. We don't know how they will develop. We might find much better biofuels, in which case we might want to pursue that very strongly. There's so much to discover, so much to investigate. Some people have argued that whilst these new technologies, these new ways of doing things are good, there's something more fundamental, and they argue that we have to stop growth. I think that's a mistake. I think that's a mistake analytically, and it's a mistake politically. It's a mistake analytically because if we simply stop growing, we're already emitting far too much. We have to cut our emissions over the next 40 years, absolutely emissions, by a factor of 2 or 3. We have to cut emissions per unit of output by a factor of 7 or 8. So simply stopping growth actually would leave us in a very difficult position unless we break this link between economic activity, production and consumption, and emissions. So I would make it more fundamental than that. I'd say we have to break that relationship between production and consumption and emissions. And that's the basic thing. If we are to get the political decisions to make these radical changes in the next 2 or 3 or 4 decades, after that it'll be much too late, then we have to show that this alternative route is actually a very attractive one. And in particular, we have to be able to argue sincerely and convincingly that for the emerging market and developing countries, this transition to the low-carbon economy can be intertwined with, be part of, the fight against poverty and overcoming poverty. So I think ethics demand that we marry the low-carbon economy with growth. The analytics show that we can do it, and without that marrying of the transition to low-carbon economy and growth and poverty reduction, we'll never get the political will to go forward. And that's why I think the argument that first and foremost we must stop growth is just a mistake.